All right, so let's get started. Defender for Cloud Apps. All right, so this is the table of content. Again, I'll do the same way. I'll go through the slides. There's not that many slides, and then I'll go through the portal, going through what we are covering in here. So let's start with an introduction of Defender for Cloud Apps. Right. So I think it's not a new thing to anyone, but that software as a service applications or SaaS applications are ubiquitous, right? It is everywhere, and it is super popular because it works across hybrid work environments, right? So it works if it doesn't matter where you are. You don't have to be inside your corporate network. You can access it from anywhere and anytime and from any device, right? And protecting those SaaS apps now and the important data that is there is a big challenge for organizations, right? Because the rise in these application usages combined with the employees kind of accessing it from all over the world, like wherever they are, not just within the cocoon firewalled network. This has introduced numerous new and sophisticated attack vectors that are now available to our attackers. So to combat these attacks efficiently, or not efficiently, maybe effectively, we need an approach that protects the data. Sorry, let me just minimize the chat so it doesn't get too distracted. To minimize, yeah, we need basically something that is more than a traditional, what we call cloud access security brokers or CASBs. And that is where Microsoft Defender for Cloud comes in. Or sorry, Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps comes in. So, yeah, so I was talking about talking about CASBs, right? The traditional. We need to do more than. Thank you. I lost the chain of thought. We need to do more than what the traditional scope of. Uh, okay. Okay. I don't know. So there was a noise, but more than what a traditional cloud access solution broker will provide, right? So how Defender for Cloud Apps helps is that it provides full protection for your SaaS applications, right? So and across all the areas that we see on the screen, right? Because it continues to provide all the fundamental, CSB functionalities like your shadow IT discovery, providing visibility into cloud app usage, your information protection, your compliance assessments and adherence to compliance, and basically protection against app-based threats from anywhere in the cloud, right? So that is there. But with Defender for Cloud Apps, it goes beyond the traditional CSB with the new SaaS security posture management or the SSPM features, because SSPM allows you to monitor security risks of SaaS applications. Like it will identify misconfigurations within the application. It will identify if an application has too much, too many people have too much privilege. It will find out if there is unnecessary user accounts, right? And a lot of other security issues. So all these application misconfiguration, Defender for Cloud Apps, include using the SSPM feature, will be able to do. It also provides advanced threat protection as part of Microsoft's XDR solution, and so basically provides really powerful correlation of signal and visibility across the full kill chain of all advanced attacks, right? Because so think about it, right? Just now we talked about Defender for Endpoint, we talked about EDR. So with EDR, we focus on detection and response at the endpoint level. While with XDR, we integrate data across not only endpoints, but across networks, servers, your cloud workloads, your firewalls, and a host of other platforms, right? Because this now enables us to detect correlation of signal and visibility across, again, the full kill chain of these advanced attacks. So with information protection that you see right here, where is my laser pointer? Let me get my laser pointer. With information protection, we are able to provide app-to-app protection, right? Which extends the code threat scenarios that we will discuss related to OAuth-enabled apps that have permissions and privileges to critical data and resources, right? And that is very common. How many times do people actually read all the details when it says, oh, I am trying to, this app requires access to your Outlook calendar. and it's going to do A, B, and C. Majority of the time, people just say yes and install that add-in or that app, but without maybe not fully realizing, how much permission it's getting access to your environment. And not to forget governance, right? Governance, if someone's trying to share a sensitive file that should not have been shared or allowed to be copied to unauthorized devices, all of those types of information protection is also provided by our Defender for Cloud Apps. Let me move to the next slide. So I hope for this specific slide, it's not new to anyone, right? For the last couple of days, and today also, we have been talking about all the different products under M365 Defender and how it works together to prevent sophisticated attacks with what we call best in breed protection at every layer, every security layer, right? So, and then again, Defender for Cloud Apps, same as Defender for Identity, same as Defender for Office, same as Defender for Endpoint. The one that we have already discussed, Defender for Cloud Apps, is obviously part of the M365 Defender suite. So let's take a look at how the SaaS app landscape has changed, right? So again, we know that SaaS applications and its corresponding data obviously is exploding at an exponential rate. As organizations, kind of like every organization, continues to grow their SaaS application usage, which is up 18% year over year. This is the amount percentage of SaaS application usage that we see year over year. We also see that cloud misconfiguration is one of the top risks when it comes to SaaS applications. So, it basically makes it essential to change the way organizations think about app protection. And we really need to take a step back and think to create a holistic strategy that can provide us with like a complete protection for the apps that are used obviously in the environment. A lot of the things I don't think so far that I've discussed is nothing new, although maybe the SaaS, this SSPM might be new to some folks. So before we look into SSPM, I've been talking about like how the traditional CASBs are not sufficient enough. So let's take a look as to what are the traditional CASB use cases, right? Again, what I'll show is just not CASB as related to Microsoft, but these are universal to CASBs, all CASBs, not just Microsoft one, right? So how do you click on this thing now? Okay, let's see. Okay, so going from left to right, most organizations will start with so-called unsanctioned apps, right? Before you have done anything, all apps are unsanctioned. Basically means that these are unmanaged and unmonitored by IT. So first thing is that IT teams needs to gain an understanding of which cloud services to support to be able to, before they can actually basically start governing them, right? Because we don't know what we need to even support. So we have to do an initial discovery. Once the initial discovery is done, and when the apps are managed and sanctioned by IT, CASBs then allow them to monitor and protect the information across those applications, right? That's perfect, right? For those sanctioned applications only. Now, the problem is that cloud threats actually go across sanctioned and unsanctioned apps, right? How many times we can have the scenario where from your phone you might have Microsoft Office as a sanctioned app, but you might not have, say, TikTok as a sanctioned app, which possibly is not in your environment. But if we allow data to be copied from Word in your iPhone to TikTok or to Snapchat or to any other unmanaged and unsanctioned applications, I just took their names, nothing specific against those applications. I'm just saying to unsanctioned apps, then we have an easy way for data leakage, right? So CASBs also steps up in those aspects and helps us in scenarios to prevent where sensitive data might be getting exfiltrated to unsanctioned cloud applications. So that is what you see on the screen is the traditional CASB protection umbrella, right? So Defender for Cloud Apps obviously is a CASB, right? There's no question about it. Before I move on to the next slide, though, I'm going to mention one other thing is that is important for you and your customer to know is that Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps is one of the very few CASBs that are multi-mode CASBs, meaning customers have the flexibility in how they want to implement the core capabilities. So what I'm trying to get to is like think about Salesforce. That's a common one that we see on customer environments where there might be multiple subscription of the same application, maybe one for the marketing team, one for the sales team, and so on. With Defender for Cloud Apps, you can have multiple subscriptions of Salesforce, and all what we are able to learn from the subscriptions show up in the same portal within M365 Defender. So you don't need to have multiple copies of M365 Defender running to manage multiple subscription that the customer might be having, right? So that's a really, really key point to point out if you're kind of talking to a customer. All right. So uh, what is it? So yeah, this slide is pretty straightforward, right? I mean, we obviously know that Defender for Cloud Apps is a leading CASB for all your cloud enablement, right? For all your cloud enablement, for all your cloud monitoring, for all your cloud governance. It obviously natively integrates with all our Microsoft solutions. But if you have when it comes to information protection, let's say you have third-party DLP solutions, like maybe you're using Symantec, you can actually have Defender for Cloud Apps work the same way, primarily work the same way with these third parties also. So we will be able to integrate with Symantec DLP protection and kind of provide the protection that it brings. If you have secure gateways, secure web gateways like Zscaler and others, we are able to natively integrate in that sense, a few clicks in that sense, integrate with these devices, network devices that you have, firewalls and proxies, so that we can continuously start getting data from these firewalls and proxies. And that's how obviously we learn. And we are able to also go in and assign governance to those firewalls and proxies so that certain data can be prevented from going out. But talking about Microsoft, with the native integrations that we have, that's the only time you get the full spectrum of benefits that your organization can have. For example, with Azure AD, I'm sorry, with Microsoft Entra ID, I don't think I'll ever get used to it. With Microsoft Entra ID, you can bring identity-centric monitoring and control of user actions via conditional access and also the reverse proxy functionality that you will be able to use at that time. If you use Power Automate, for example, right, if we are natively integrated to it, so now Power Automate can provide centralized automation of all of these alerts via the ecosystem of, I believe, more than 250 connectors that Power Automate has, right? We already talked about Defender for Endpoint. With Defender for Endpoint, it's just a single click integration. I think we already saw that when I went into settings in the last demo, and you are able to extend the discovery of your shadow IT beyond your corporate network. So all the BYOD devices, you are able to, as long as they are, onboarded into Defender for Endpoint, you are able to have visibility on the applications and SaaS apps that are running in those devices, and able to, kind of look into and go deeper, right? With Defender for Cloud, that I'm going to talk next, you can extend your security configuration assessment and all these recommendations to beyond your M365 environment to your IaaS and PaaS environment, right? So obviously our choice, um, obviously our choice and our recommendation to use the Microsoft products, but I also wanted to say that if there are some third-party products, we will still be able to work with them and bring a lot of value to your organization. All right. So being a CSV is, again, we're not saying that Defender for Cloud Apps is not a CSV anymore, because being a CSV is a fundamental value prop for Defender for Cloud Apps. It's just with the Cloud App Access Security Broker model, one of the things is discovering the apps, sanctioning the apps, and obviously unsanctioning the apps that we are able to do with ease, right? So we are able to do all what Defender for Cloud Apps, what a normal traditional CSV will be doing. But we are just moving from, also not moving, but we are also adding in the SSPM capabilities, so that we are able to kind of ensure that the apps are maintaining the best practices and compliance with your organizational standards that you have specified. And if not, obviously we will flag them, point them out. And the other thing that I want to mention is that this thing happens constantly, right? It's not a one-time scan and done. This vigilance is running 24/7 to kind of make sure that maybe you have corrected everything and your compliance posture and everything else to is to what your organization would want. But we want to still keep an eye on it so that we can make sure there are no drifts in that compliance posture. And Defender for Cloud Apps will obviously continue to do that without you having to do anything. So let's talk about shadow IT, right? And talk about governance of all the applications. So we all know that cloud-based services obviously has significant increased productivity, but it also has added a lot of different challenges, right? So, and basically the biggest challenge is that people using a lot of applications that your IT might not be even aware of, right? So shadow IT, that's what we call shadow IT, and shadow IT discovery and app posture knowledge is critical for your overall SaaS application protection, right? Because shadow IT will allow you to identify the SaaS apps. Once it does the discovery, it will then do risk assessment and give you usage analytics. How much is getting used, who is using it, which devices are using it, and then it will also allow you to kind of put controls in place, like whatever control capabilities might be available, right? Depending upon what we're trying to do, what type of app it is, some control capabilities might be different, but it will then show you what are the things that you can do to improve your app security and your compliance posture. Obviously, this helps your apps to be less susceptible to a potential attack. So again, shadow IT is a very, very important component of SaaS app protection, right? Let's spend just a little bit more time on it, right? So this is a very simple slide. I know it looks like a flowchart and everything, but it's actually very, very simple. If you look at it, it basically walks you through in securing how do you secure your newly discovered SaaS applications, right? So basically you discover, you understand if they should be sanctioned or not for your organizational use. Sanctioned apps can then utilize the SSPM controls to secure it and to keep a continuous eye on it, again, to make sure that there are no drifts. So how do we recommend on managing these newly discovered applications, right? So how do you know, like, if it should be approved or not approved? I guess that's the question I'm trying to get here, right? And so that's pretty simple, right? You ask yourself, should my employee use this application in terms of both their productivity point of view and also the security and compliance implications of the app, right? Just because my employees are using it doesn't necessarily mean that that app should be actually sanctioned for use in my environment, right? So, but if the answer is yes, that they should be using and the app has good security controls, then yes, you sanction the app, right? If not, you don't sanction it, or if maybe then you kind of put it in for further review, right? To kind of find out, to kind of know more about it in that sense. And then what do? You then connect the app with Defender for Cloud Apps using the cloud APIs that might be available with that specific application, so that Cloud Defender for Cloud App can get that deep visibility, and the DLP capabilities can be extended to that application, right? Again, these type of capabilities will only be available if that application provides Microsoft with an app connector, so that we can actually connect from Defender for Cloud Apps to that application, right? Otherwise, we won't be able to know about it. I'm going to talk about that in details in just a minute, right? So, or the other thing you can do, onboard it to Azure Active Directory or Entra ID, or any other identity provider in that sense. I mean, we are not married to Azure Active Directory. Obviously, that's our IDP of choice, but you can use any other, like, Ping or Okta or other identity providers, so that you can then manage the identities and control the logins to these applications via single sign-on, and then provide conditional access and session controls for the application, so that you can basically block any risky activity in real time, right? So that's the keyword, that it's in real time. So if there is no way users should be using the app, then obviously you just unsanction the app for use, and that way that command will be propagated directly to your endpoints, blocking any access to the unsanctioned applications. But what about apps? What about, when you see, and I'm saying from real life experience, there are apps that people use and are really using heavily for productivity standpoint, but the app is not in a sanctioned state, right? So we have, so that you can then put that in the monitoring mode. So with the monitoring mode, which is in between sanctioned and unsanctioned, it basically will, what the app will do is, if anyone is trying to access that application, that SaaS app, it will give the user a warning that this is not sanctioned in the environment. Do it only for official purposes. Be aware of blah blah blah, whatever you want to say. And it will also create an alert for the administrator to be aware that someone went to this application, so that they can take a look as to how many people are using it. If thousands of people are using it, there must be something important that that app provides from a productivity standpoint that you need to take further, right? But with the monitoring mode, what happens is that the users are not prevented from using the app. It's just they're given a warning so that they are aware, and then they can continue doing what they need to do with that application. So it's just between sanctioned and unsanctioned, a really helpful one from a practical standpoint. So this slide is a nicer version of the slide before, right? If you're talking to customers, the other slide might get them a little confused, like if you're talking to a customer executive. So this is basically the same one. You discover, you identify the apps, you evaluate and analyze, and basically then you decide how you want to govern those applications, and then you decide what is going to be the security posture that you want to apply, and then you basically keep it monitoring. I mean, keep monitoring it. Now, excuse me. Now, before you can apply policies to the applications, you have to discover them. So how do you start the discovery process, right? So one of the first thing you should be enabling is the integration with Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. This native integration immediately allows you to start collecting data on cloud traffic across your Windows 10 and Windows 11 devices, both on the network and off the network, right? So Defender for Endpoint Defender for Endpoint is a definitive one that you would want to enable right away if you're using Defender for Endpoint. Then now, one other thing is that because it's a SaaS application, all your SaaS apps has to be reached back to the cloud. Like, I have to make an internet query and I have to go to the cloud to be able to reach my cloud apps, meaning my firewalls and proxies possibly will have traces of these applications in their logs. So what I can do is that I can deploy Defender for Cloud Apps log collector on these firewalls and proxies to collect data from them and send it and basically analyze it and see which apps I do see traces of being used in my environment, right? Now, as I mentioned earlier, there are quite a few proxies and SWGs like Zscaler, iBoss, Corada for mobile devices, and others which can natively integrate with Defender for Cloud Apps. Meaning, once you set up the integration, you don't have to manually go and set up a log transfer. That integration will happen automatically, right? You don't have to create a separate log forwarder, right? And the other thing this native integration can do is that, let's say if you have a proxy where you set up a log forwarder, yes, it's sending me the logs, but I am not able to utilize the proxy as a way to block access to an unsanctioned to an application to let's say to an SaaS app from an end user perspective, right? Because that proxy only is sending me the logs. I can't use that proxy for prevention and blocking. But with the ones that for which like Zscaler, Corada, iBoss, and others that we have direct integration with, I can actually utilize them to prevent access to the ones that I want to get blocked, right? So now that the cloud discovery is running on your network, you have all the log forwarders or direct integration and Defender for Endpoint integration done. You now have continuous reports that are generated, and you can look at the cloud discovery dashboard portal, which we will take a look to get a full picture of what applications are being used in your organization. Right, so this is your cloud discovery portal. Obviously, we can't really see anything there, but yeah, we will take a look when we go to the portal. So we can see the definition of SSPM on the slide. Again, that means to provide automated and continuous monitoring of SaaS applications that reduces risks and increase compliance. Much like if you have worked with Defender for Cloud, the Cloud Security Posture Management or CSPM capabilities that you have for IaaS and PaaS environment, SSPM is focused on the same type of visibility for workloads where the underlying infrastructure is actually not owned by you because these are SaaS applications in the cloud. All right. So where do I see the data for that SSPM picks up? You see it in multiple different places. You see it under recommendations. You see it under secure score. And you will actually, if you go to secure score under M365 Defender, you can filter by applications, right? It's not called products anymore. You filter by applications, and then all the vulnerabilities that we have found will show up in here under secure score, so that you can kind of go in and fix them, get them more in line to your security settings that we recommend, and obviously that will also help with your secure score going up. You can also use the risk score from the cloud app catalog for 31,000 cloud apps that we have in our catalog, right? So we have accessed and evaluated over 31,000 applications, SaaS applications, and we have it in our catalog, meaning with all these applications, I can have a direct API connection so that I can so that I can control and look into its usage, manage settings, everything else through that API. Now, then we rank it, right? Because not everyone is up to the compliance standards that all the different factors of compliance standards that we would want. So we rank and score them based on more than 90 different risk factors, so that you have a ongoing visibility not only into its use, how many people are using it, how much data is getting into those applications, but also you have an understanding that okay, app one has a higher risk factor, so that you are aware of it before you use it, right? So app connectors, that's the one I already mentioned, but this is how Defender for our cloud apps can get knowledgeable on the inner workings of all these thousands and thousands of apps. That is again accomplished by using what I mentioned briefly earlier, the app connectors. Because app connectors uses the APIs that are actually provided by the app owner, like the app creator in that sense, so that we can have greater visibility and control provided on that app by Defender for Cloud Apps. Now that control using the app API actually happens using between the application and Defender for Cloud Apps happens using encrypted HTTPS, right? And then every app is different. Every app uses its own framework. Every app has its own API limitations, like throttling or how much API limits it's going to provide to us. We have to work within those limitations of the framework for each of those API connectors that we get from these 31,000 plus applications. So this is just a screenshot of some of the API capabilities. There is on our doc site, you can actually get a list of a lot more. So you can see all the different, there are a lot more other, as I mentioned, there are 90 different criteria that it goes through, and it kind of evaluates, and that's how it ranks. How if an app, what is the compliance posture, security posture of a particular app. These are some of the more common ones that customers use. All right. Uh, this is an interesting slide because a lot of time customers don't look at a cloud as an application, but just like getting visibility into 31,000 plus applications, Defender for Cloud Apps also can get visibility into other cloud platforms, including our own Azure, Google Cloud, or AWS. So what do you do at that point? You use, let's say we'll take AWS as an example, right? They have documentation of how to connect Defender for Cloud Apps with AWS. And actually, a lot of documentation is also on our side that you can utilize for the majority of the bigger applications, the majority of the bigger SaaS apps like AWS, GCP, and others, how to connect to Ping or Okta or anything like that. We have very detailed documentation available. But let's talking about AWS, you basically connect, it shows you how you can connect Defender for Cloud Apps to that AWS instance and then connect with the AWS provided security auditing information, right? So AWS is the one that has provided us, that is basically doing the auditing and also providing us with that information. So we have visibility into it. So we are not the one saying how AWS should be configured from a security and compliance standpoint. This is provided by AWS, that the one that we are then using to report back on. All these benchmarks are from AWS and Google and from others. So here's the next piece of how Defender for Cloud Apps deliver, which is information protection. So let this pan out. It gives me a minute. So we know in today's world, it's often not enough to know what's happening in your cloud environment after the fact, right? You want to be able to stop breaches and leaks in real time before employees intentionally or unintentionally, kind of put your data and your organization in risk. Now, keyword in here is in real time, right? And to be able to do that, Defender for Cloud Apps integrates with any IDP, which can be Azure, which can be Entra, sorry, which can be Ping, it can be Okta, any IDP that can provide these capabilities with two types of controls. You get the access controls and you also get the session controls. Access controls define who can access, and session controls provide real-time control in session. So if you're using Azure Active Directory as your IDP or identity provider, these controls are integrated and streamlined. But I do want to mention again that we support all other identity providers with Defender for Cloud Apps. So you get this extremely powerful feature called conditional access app control, because conditional access app control will use a reverse proxy architecture and integrates with your identity provider. And I will talk about it even a little bit more details in just a bit, right? So what that means is that if you're using, for example, say Active Directory, you can now get it integrated with conditional access app control with just actually two clicks. In just 2 clicks, you can get it completely integrated if you're using Azure AD, right? And then you can easily and you can select how you want to enforce both access and session controls by going into the application settings and how you want which application is going to have which control. So from a conditional access control standpoint, it works the same way that we would expect, right? You specify or you define the who, which can be a user, it can be a group of users, or it can be all users, right? Along with the what, in this case, that's going to be which cloud apps that you're trying to apply it to, and the where, which can be specific locations or networks if you want to narrow it down to specific subnets or networks or locations. And once you get them specified, Defender for Cloud Apps can now manage user app access and not only be able to do that, but also be able to control and monitor sessions in real time. So with these access and session policies, you can apply a lot of controls, like you can prevent data exfiltration, you can block the download, you can prevent cut, copy, or print of sensitive documents on unauthorized devices, right? You can force use of multi-factor authentication if necessary. You can monitor user sessions for compliance. You can obviously block access to that application. You can even block sending sensitive content in applications like Slack or Teams and say that this is not the right application to have these sensitive content, right? So there is a tremendous amount of capabilities that you are able to then apply at that time, right? And again, these policies takes action in real time and in session. Now, you might be wondering how it gets done, right? Specifically when SaaS applications can be connected directly over the internet from the user's device without touching any internal network hardware, right? I might be sitting at home and I can be using my phone to go directly to the application using my internet, right? How will Defender for Cloud App even have control over this, right? That's a very common question. So what happens is that when you create a session policy with conditional access app control, user sessions are redirected through a reverse proxy instead of directly going to the application. So what happens obviously after that, from then on, user request and responses go through Defender for Cloud Apps rather than going directly to the application itself. So what do I mean by that is that when you protect a session using a proxy, all the relevant URLs and cookies are replaced by Defender for Cloud Apps. For example, let's say if you are going to an application with a link whose domain say ends with travisapp.com, that link's domain is going to get suffixed with something like star.mcas.ms. So travisapp.com URL will get replaced by travisapp.com.mcas.ms. The beauty of this method is that it doesn't require you to install anything on the device, right? And it makes it real ideal when you are trying to monitor or control sessions coming from unmanaged devices where you don't have a lot of control. But every as I said, like everything, because the URL is now redirected through Defender for Cloud Apps, Defender for Cloud Apps is able to now get visibility and is able to provide session controls and access controls to that application. Now, data, right? And data is always increasing and expanding, right? So imagine a vast ocean of raw data. From a security perspective, we need to find and categorize important data that requires protection and separate it from data that's more like public information, right? To be able to do that, Defender for Cloud Apps can get connected with Microsoft Purview information protection in just one click. Once connected, Defender for Cloud Apps can now automatically assign spatial labels to files based on the labeling that is assigned to those files in Purview Info Protection environment. So these labels, which I'm sure all of you guys know, are the sensitivity labels, basically acts as a kind of a rule or guideline for the specific files, right? And depending upon how the labels are set up, for example, you can even have some files that might get extra protection, like it's always encrypted, or if it's leaving the environment and going to maybe an authorized user, it's automatically going to get encrypted and stuff like that. So those sensitivity labels and everything that you have in Purview, once the integration is set up, then Defender for Cloud Apps will also have full visibility on it, and we will be able to take the right action depending upon the sensitivity, I can't pronounce that word, sensitivity of that file. Now, I do want to say that to utilize this feature, you do need Defender for Cloud Apps license, obviously, along with the license for Azure Information Protection Premium, the P1 license. You need the P1 license for Purview integration to work with Cloud Apps. And this is the where you can see, how the integration is just one click. You go to settings, you go to Cloud Apps, and then you just select info protection as that you are allowing. So going through that process again, as soon as the integration with Purview is in place, then Defender for Cloud Apps will first retrieve the list of sensitivity labels that's used in your tenant. It will get that information from Purview, and then you can initiate a manual scan if you want, or an automatic scan to label all your documents so that the documents can get the labels that's in there. If you do a manual scan, obviously only existing files and repositories will get scanned and labeled. But with an automatic scan, not only it will scan the existing files and repositories, but all the new and modified files also will get added to the scan queue to get the labeling, right? And then Defender for Cloud Apps will then basically will do content inspection, and it has more than 100 plus common file types that it uses to basically figure out which sensitivity label to apply to which file, right? So when I say 100 plus common file types that Defender for Cloud Apps support, those are like Office documents, Open Office documents, compressed files, your XML files, HTML files, obviously a lot more. There's more than 100, but I just named some of the more common ones, right? So it will extract, do content inspection, figure out which label should be applied. So let's look at a life cycle of a sensitive file, right? Now that we are talking about information protection. So when considering the life cycle of a sensitive file in the cloud, we consider, obviously there can be many use cases, right? But this is a classic example where a user uploads, let's start with the user uploading a sensitive file to a cloud application. Once the scanning is complete, and this is taking into consideration that the integration with Purview is in there, a sensitivity label gets applied to that application, right? And the file policies that you have created will then start to apply. You can create file policies that can allow you to enforce a wide range of automated processes using API that the app owner provided, meaning depending on the application where this sensitive file has been uploaded, right? Now, there can be many ways to protect a sensitive file, right? You can, for example, set it up to provide continuous scan for compliance, let's say from a legal e-discovery standpoint. You can do data loss prevention for sensitive content, meaning that it shouldn't be shared publicly and it is allowed to stay in that application, but shouldn't be shared publicly, right? So there are many other use cases, and with your specific policy, you then decide how you want your file protection and information protection to work, right, for that specific file. Right. So let's say you have decided that this file should not be shared with anyone outside the company, or this file should not be shared with specific external domain or domains, right? There are 5 domains that I don't want this file to be shared, and you created a policy like that. At that point, when a user tries to share the sensitive file to an external user that doesn't match those criteria, or it's within that, let's say those 5 domains where he or she is not allowed to share with, obviously it gets denied and an alert gets created, and you will be able to see it under the alerts window under M365 Defender. Pretty straightforward. So to wrap it up, right, especially with Microsoft Purview integration, it brings you a tremendous amount of benefit. You are able to either use any of the 300 plus, built-in the sensitivity information types or sensitive information types. You can also look at regulatory constraints as 300 plus as the GDPR ones or HIPAA or FINRA or any of the other ones. You can obviously know if you work with Purview that you can create your own custom sensitive information type, right? If your custom if there is a pattern that can be matched to what you're trying to target, you can create your own custom sensitive information type in Purview, right? You can create policies to generate alerts using either pre-provided templates that we will see when we go to the portal, or you can create your own custom policy from scratch. And then at that time onwards, whenever this thing triggers, an alert is generated, and you can then set it up how you want the next steps to be. You can set it up to auto remediate, do whatever you want. You have the full end-to-end flexibility in figuring out how you want to that alert to function from a remediation standpoint, I mean. So to wrap up information protection, let's break it into phases, right? The first phase is about understanding the data that you have and how it's being used in your environment. You will obviously need to link up your different applications so you can figure out where there might be risks. And it's also important to figure out just how big those risks are, right? Because there's always going to be risks, right? You kind of have to figure out, is it big enough, right? Or what is big enough, right? You kind of have to define those things. And then moving into the second phase, you have to think about, kind of organizing and safeguarding your data. That's where you're able to use your DLP policies and keep your data safe by maybe automatically protecting or encrypting the file, right? A lot of these features that we have been just discussing in the last, 5, 6 slides. The last phase is all about keeping an eye out and looking into any issues. If something not right, obviously we'll need to fix it, right? You create rules and getting alerts will obviously help you catch problems if you have need to create custom rules, and then you can decide what to do next. Like you can put things on hold or change permissions or take any other appropriate actions that you would like to take. So that's our info protection. Let's talk about threat protection, right? Which is also a unique feature of our cloud apps compared to other traditional CASBs that are in the market. Now, what it says on the screen, right? Uncoordinated threat signals across multiple platforms creates risky environments. Is this new to any one of us? No, because we have been talking about it yesterday. We have been talking about it today, that only when you get all the alerts from all the different vectors in your environment and you're able to correlate and coalesce those alerts, that's the only time it's going to give you the whole attack story, and you'll have an end-to-end visibility into the attack, right? Normal CSVs don't do that because they are only working with the SaaS applications. That's it, right? So from Defender for Cloud App standpoint, threat protection is obviously built in and integrated, and it kind of enables your customers to detect advanced attacks and cloud native threats, right? Cloud native threats when we see that there is an abnormal behavior or malicious activity in those applications, right? This is honestly no different how threat protection works across all of the M365 Defender product segments. But in this specific case, we are just talking about SaaS applications, right? Threat to SaaS applications in your environment. So I'm not going to spend much to any time on this slide, right? With everything that we have been discussing, there is no question. We are all pretty well versed, I hope, about challenges of data security that our customers face, and honestly, how M365 Defender comes in to provide that, multiple layers of protection. So let me just move on to the next slide. So value of Defender for Cloud Apps being part of M365 Defender suite, right? Again, just to kind of go over it, there are many CASBs, but CASBs were measured around two main focus in relation. Like when I think about threat protection and CASBs, they were always there are always two pillars that they focused on. One is malware detection, and the other one is UEBA, which is basically the anomaly detection based on your user behavior, your entity behavior, and your tenant behavior. That has been the traditional CASB threat protection that you get. But we need more, right? And so we need to shift to scenario-based detections, right? Again, we need to move into scenario-based detections. And to be able to do that, we need to get input and intelligence from multiple other sources like your endpoints, your network devices, your cloud storage, your obviously SaaS applications, and a lot of others, right? So other than that, we are not going to have the full knowledge. Now, I do understand that with so much data, there is a chance that anomalies may hide and might get missed in between all the noise. But again, that's where M365 Defender comes in handy. And as we saw a little back, it will help in stitching and correlating alerts together to discover the real incident, which otherwise normally will be missed, right? So think about M365 Defender and Defender for Cloud Apps as what I'd like to say, like a superhero team. Multi-purpose cloud access security broker, which is Defender for Cloud Apps, and an integrated XDR plus CM platform that you can do with 365 Defender along with Sentinel. It's like a match made in heaven. And honestly, it's super critical against the fight that we see with the sophistication of attacks on our SaaS applications that we see today. Now, David kind of utilized this this scenario yesterday, but I'm gonna maybe reuse it. This is a very common scenario that we see, right? This is a multi-stage attack that I'm going to show, but it's a real nice example of one of the a very common cyber attack, which is the business email compromise, or what we call BECs. So now, why am I focusing on this, really, common one? Because advanced persistent attacks that we see normally against, are done by nation threat actors, right? Where they might be focused on certain other government organization or certain other companies. Those are different. Those are very complicated, extremely sophisticated, but focused on only handful of targets. Whereas BEC attacks like this, the business email compromise attacks, occur all the time, and they threaten every user in every organization and can result in serious financial damage, right? So let's take a look as to how we see Defender for Cloud Apps, along with, because this has email, Defender for Office, and Microsoft 365 Defender. How do we all come together to your BEC threat, and how do we protect it, right? So as you will see over here, a lot of MITRE attack techniques are going to be used, right? We have initial access, we have persistence, we have defensivation, we have lateral movement, we have exfiltration. We are going to do all of these through our wonderfully crafted BEC attack scenario, right? So what happens? A user gets an email, very common. It's a phishing email. The user clicks on the URL and enters the credential by mistake on the phishing side. Then, with a lateral movement, um, the attacker will start an internal phishing campaign, right? I'm sorry. So where is the lateral movement? Okay, so don't worry about these because these are just saying they got the email, they clicked on it, and the attacker is also doing. Yeah, that's a good one. That the attacker is always tries to kind of cover their tracks. So what they're trying to do is that they will do inbox manipulation rules so that their internal phishing campaign that they're now doing from user Kelsey is not visible to user Kelsey at all, right? So then they start a internal phishing campaign. They move laterally so that now they are able to get into her manager's inbox, whose name is O King. So now they're able to get to Oscar King's inbox. Oscar King obviously gets the new phishing email, and now Oscar King is also compromised, right? His email is also compromised. The bad actors now creates a forwarding rule, which is under persistence, to forward all incoming emails to now an external address. And they will, at the same time, they will also do same defense evasion techniques by creating an inbox rule to delete certain messages and basically hide their traces, right? So now they're having access to all of emails that Oscar King has, which is the manager, and obviously has important, valuable information. But with now what they also try to do, they're able to uh, start data exfiltration, for example, from Oscar King's OneDrive account and download all documents and valuable sensitive information they might have, right? So this is a very common attack scenario, as you can see how phishing attacks kind of go, and takes care of credentials, takes care of takes over the inboxes, and can obviously exfiltrate data. But if you think about it from utilizing Defender for Office, utilizing Defender for Microsoft 365 Defender, and Defender for Cloud Apps, in every step of the way, we would have prevented and we would have also raised an alert so that you as an administrator are aware of that something is bad is happening in that sense, so that you can take preventive actions, right? You can see that email reported by user as a malware or phishing, Defender for Office will pick that up, right? That defense evasion is happening and it's going to a Tor IP address, Defender for Cloud Apps will pick it up, right? That there is download that's happening, and a big amount of download that's happening that will get picked up for Defender for Clouds app, right? There is suspicious data read that's happening on OneDrive, M365 Defender will pick that up, right? So all these products comes together and makes it truly valuable for the safety and protection of the data. So these are basically a screenshot of the alerts. So you can basically go in. We have already seen incidents, and you can basically see that for that incident that I just showed you, you will get an incident for a multi-stage attack with all the different alerts, along with all the different mailboxes, user accounts, applications like OneDrive, everything else. It will have the whole information for you ready so that you are able to take action. So the last part is app-to-app governance, right? This is a comparatively newer capability within Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps because, sorry, as you probably obviously know and you're experiencing, I mean, we all have more cloud apps to take advantage of all the capabilities than in the sense more cloud apps than all the capabilities that we actually need to do our business, right? But that is the way it is, right? And with the proliferation of apps comes risks, right? Because this leads us to the question as to, do you know what your apps are doing when you are not looking, right? It sounds like a movie thriller, but that's the fact, right? Do I know what my app is doing? I installed it, it asked me for certain permissions, I gave it, but do I have any idea what my app is actually doing? Because apps don't always behave as we think, and sometimes even trusted applications can be compromised, and which will then change its behavior. Then the next part of app-to-app protection is those risky OAuth apps, right? That has proliferated, right? because there are so many third-party productivity apps that might be installed by our users, by all of us in our organization that request permission, right? And I think I mentioned that example, right? I was a victim of that, where I allowed a calendar one that I thought that calendar application will make it easy for my partners to see my calendar data and show my partners when I am available for kind of setting up a call, so that we are not doing all this back and forth, when are you available kind of a thing. But I didn't really realize the amount of data to my mailbox that I gave it access to. Right now, I am a security guy. Think about normal business users. Obviously, they're not going to be that much prone to really understand and take the right step. Right. So that's why there must be a process and oversight to verify that apps continue to behave in the way they were intended when they were first introduced within your environment. And with the OAuth apps, because you're accepting third-party app permissions, it obviously immediately becomes a potential security risk, right? So you really need to have visibility also on the app permissions that your users are granting to these third-party applications. That's my OAuth app. All right, right. Yes, I think this one I just covered, so I'm going to move on to the next one. So Defender for Cloud Apps obviously helps with that aspect of properly governing these applications. It enables you to see which user installed OAuth applications have access to what amount of data to your Microsoft 365 data, to your Google Workspace data, and to your Salesforce data, depending upon which they are using, and what permissions are provided to those applications, right? And which user actually granted that permission, right? So you'll have a whole visibility, and we will see that when we go into the portal. Again, all of these will help you understand which apps to ban and which apps to allow. You can see all your registered OAuth apps in a single dashboard. You can see the status of the apps, their activities, the amount of data that is transferring, and again, you can create governance policies to kind of manage those applications, for a lack of a better term. So let me take 30 seconds, bring up my portal, and I will then basically share my screen. So this is a demo environment that I have, again, which is pre-populated by some demo data. So let's take a look, right? I mean, we have already seen this environment doesn't have Defender for Endpoint, but I do have Defender for Cloud Apps, which is in here. But I've already gone through incidents and alerts and hunting and all of these things. So I'm just gonna get into the Cloud Apps blade directly. So the first thing in the Cloud Apps blade is discovery, right? So when you started, that's your dashboard. Right. Again, the dashboard is information that you can get from the other blades, but it just brings in the important information directly for you on this main dashboard. You see how many apps you have, how many IP addresses are, meaning how many IP addresses are using, how many endpoints in that sense are using these applications, how many users, how many devices, how much data, how many sanctioned, how many unsanctioned, all of these, and who are the users who are using it the most. Like in my case, this user is using 2.2 gigs of data into these SaaS applications. So he's doing a lot of collaboration, I would think. If I need to know, I can actually go into this user and I can actually see which application he is using you know, for about 2 gigs of data compared to other users who are less than 1 gig. Right. So interesting stuff on our dashboard. But let's go into the discovered apps. So these are all the apps that has been discovered in this demo environment, right? So now you can filter them down in multiple different ways, which is super helpful. Obviously, you can go either by sanctioned or by unsanctioned. If you want to kind of take a look into those where you have already made a choice, you can also go by risk score. Now, risk score is again a score that you can modify if you want. Like if you go into settings, and I believe it's in settings. If we go into cloud apps, yep, right here. So these are all the different risk factors and criterias and how Microsoft grades it. And that's what all this information then for each of the application is evaluated. and that's what it shows up as a risk score. Now, if you have, there is one, for example, how old is the application, right? That is a risk score. If the application is, very young or very new, young is the wrong word, very new, then it might be considered more risky, right? But that's how Microsoft sees it, for example, right? So if you have a different view, you can actually modify it and, and create your own risk profile criterias. Because I think for a majority of the SaaS apps, it's not that old anymore. It's not that old. All right, so you have the risk score, you have compliance risk factors. Like if you are trying to figure out, which applications that might be in use that has a FINRA, dependability in that, not dependability, but like a compliance. What's the word? Like a compliance. You know what I mean, right? It can be related to FINRA. You can just sort by that, and you can see if there is an application that has a FINRA specific compliance criteria, which in our case are these ones, right? So you can do by compliance factors. You can also do by security risk factor, right? Where they might be allowing file sharing, while they might be allowing, I don't know, like they might not be allowing or allowing multi-factor authentication, right? I mean, all these different things, or they are sending password in plain text, basic things, right? All of these things you can figure out, and if you want to filter by that. Or you can also go by categories, right? If you're looking at a specific category of applications, you can also click on queries or saved queries and pick up a query that you would want to see, right? Maybe cloud apps that allow anonymous use, right? You can do that and the query is made for you. Fortunately, we don't have anything like that. But again, you can use queries that are inbuilt, and not to forget that um, you can also create your own query, right? These are the ones that you have created, but you can also go and create, put a filter in and create your own query to kind of filter down the discovered applications. Now, with each one of them, it also obviously shows you, let me go back to main page where I have everything. Where are all the other ones? So one filter must be staying in there. That is odd. I had a lot more applications in here right now. Well, there must be a filter that is still in there, but it won't prevent me showing what I was trying to show you. So, for example, like Microsoft To Do application, you are able to see immediately how many users are using it. In this case, 2 users. You can see that they're using the same IP address, so it might be a shared device, which is also, you can see with one device in here with 2 users, they are sharing a device, and both of them are using the To Do application. In this case, it's a sanctioned app, right? But you obviously have the choice to, I don't have it in here because it's not a real environment, but you can also put it up as unsanctioned. You can put it up as monitored. Again, monitored means that the user is going to get a warning and you're going to get an alert, but they will be able to access this application, right? The other things that you can do is that if you look into it, this might not be the best one. Let's see. Yeah, it will actually tell you what are the different, like all other, like the factors that makes up the risk score for security, for compliance, for legal. So in this case, this is a Microsoft application. All of these are green. Like, so if you are looking for, it's compliant with Privacy Shield, it's compliance with SOX, it's compliance with ISO 27018, right? You can get all those informations in here. And if you want to kind of see it in a bigger screen, you can go into that application and find those specific users, what we have been referring to as the 2 separate users. I see there is a test user 1 and there is a test user 3 who are using from one device. They are using 81 KB and they're using this application. Now, a couple things to show over here is that you are obviously able to do the same way, IP addresses, it able to find users and everything else. One other thing I want to show you in here is you can create an executive report, right? Which is basically called a shadow IT executive report, so that if your customer administration wants to get the whole list, you can get it out from here in a nice looking report. Let me see if this other environment might be better. Okay, so this is another environment, right, where I have now I want to show you one thing in here called a snapshot, and there is an option for a snapshot report, and then there is another option for a continuous report. So a snapshot report is basically it's an ad hoc. It basically provides an ad hoc visibility on the traffic logs that you have manually uploaded, right? So if you upload logs, it's going to analyze it and tell you what we have found. So, and you can actually see, because this is a dummy environment, we have to have data that has been uploaded. So if you actually go into settings, cloud apps, snapshot reports, you can see that the data that I am seeing was from a snapshot that was captured from Cisco Iron Port device on August 5th, right? And that's where I am getting Defender for Cloud Apps is evaluating and going through all the logs that we have captured from Cisco Iron Port and uploaded. And that's what's giving me all this information about all the discovered apps, how much data, all of this we are getting from that snapshot that was provided. But majority of time in a real customer environment, you're going to have continuous reports, right? Continuous reports means that it's getting logs automatically uploaded using the log connector, so you don't have to manually provide the log. Next, it means it can also mean that you already have the Defender for Endpoint integration done, which is super critical, right? To be able to have access and visibility, not access, but visibility in all the Defender for Endpoint controlled machines, which might be within your network and outside your network. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the secure web gateways of Zscaler and some of the other ones can be just a couple click integration where you don't even have to set up a log collector. And then the last one is the Cloud Discovery API. You can utilize that also to get the logs for you to analyze. Again, in this case, it's a snapshot, but if it's a real environment, possibly you're going to be setting it up for continuous upload. All right, so let's take a look. What else do we look into? Cloud App Catalog is the same as the discovered ones, right? Basically, it's a catalog. Let's talk about OAuth apps, right? I mean, we have been talking about OAuth. So you can see that in this demo environment with the data that has been provided, we can see that there are quite a few OAuth applications that the users have granted permission, right? So this is CDX MS Cloud App Security Demo was allowed by one user, and this is all the permissions that is in here. Read and write Intune RBAC settings. Wow, that's quite something, right? View and modify this, read and write Intune apps, right? So it has quite some permissions. Now, this is obviously an example, but the question comes in, do this application need to have this amount of information or this amount of permission for it to function, right? So again, this manage OAuth apps page gives you all the applications that have been approved by or granted permission by your user or users, so that and it's in here for you to evaluate, right? So that you can kind of take the correct actions. If you need to know which user did that, let's find that out. We can select that one. And I see mod administrator is the one who is the culprit in here in that sense, who has provided access, so that I can go back and talk to him or her to kind of find out, what is this app doing with so much privileges. Okay, so let's take a look at some policies, right? Activity log, governance log. These are just logs of what's happening. Like whenever you create a snapshot report, you create something else that will show up in governance log. And then activity log shows what people are actually doing at this interface, right? Who is doing what, so that you can keep an eye on who is doing what. Now let's talk about policies, right? So there are two different areas. One is policy templates, one is policy management, right? Policy templates are all the templates that is available for you to pick up and apply so that they can be made active in your environment. So these are all the possible ones that Microsoft has created for you. You can filter it down, do what you need, and then configure it, and that way it will become active in your environment. Just because it's in here doesn't mean it's active. To see which ones are active, you have to go into policy management, right? Policy management shows which are ones are active, and if there any alerts or incidents that have triggered from those active policies, right? So these are all the policies that I have. Let's take a look, right? I mean, what can we do? So these are all policies. Why don't we take a look if do we have any information protection policy, right? We talked about information protection. We don't have. Why don't we create a file policy, right? Maybe we'll prevent something, do something with it. So let's create a file policy. Let's give it a name. Now, immediately it says that, oh, you're creating a information protection policy for a file. There are already few where the templates are already created, right? So let's say, I select this. If I select that and I figure out that, okay, this has already been done, so I don't need to create it from scratch. I can still modify settings. I can decide if it's going to be what the severity rating is, what category it's going to show up under, what is the description, and what are all the different extensions. This was like digital certificates file extensions. So these are all the extensions I can remove or add more. Where does it apply, if it applies to all users or not, and then what do I need to do, what do I want to do if it gets triggered, how many alerts I should allow, all of these things then you are able to do. Now, if I don't want to create one from a template, I can let's create the same one. Maybe from no template, let's give it a name. I don't know, like prevent sharing or something like that. Like, it's a DLP one, and it kind of tells me what it's allowed to do. I can even add a filter to say that, it should not be if a file name matches this, or if a file type matches this, that then it's going to prevent, external sharing, all of those things. So you can create own, or you can basically use from a template, or which might be much easier if you're trying to create information protection policy, if you're trying to create a conditional access policy, all of these things you will be able to do it from here, from under policies. One last place that I want to show you in here, which I've been here already a couple of times, is the settings under cloud apps, right? So there are some information in here, information about how it can get connected with CM, information about playbooks. We already discussed a score matrix where you have the capability to modify how an application is graded, how you can upload a snapshot if you have it from a proxy or a firewall that doesn't allow native integration. How do you configure a continuous report, right? With a continuous report, you do have to specify, where is the data source, and then you kind of have to start creating once you have the data source. Obviously, I don't have the data source in here. Automatic log upload will be from firewalls and proxies. That doesn't allow in native integration. You provide those IP addresses and information, and you can basically start collecting the data. Let's see what else. App connectors, right? There's only one in here, but you can create the one for all the other ones that you want. This is interesting, which is admin quarantine, right? If you are, quarantining a file from an info protection standpoint, then where do you as an administrator go to find that file is in the folder that you specify, right? So you can specify where you're gonna keep it. And this is your integration with Purview that you can do. If you're using an external DLP or data loss prevention like Semantic or something, you will be able to add the connector to the external DLP from here. And so that is it.